Welcome back to the OHSU Effect Inside Health and Science. So many people are overcoming things like cancer because they're being detected early, in part thanks to advances in medical imaging. With me now on KXL is Dr. Charles Springer, a senior scientist at the Advanced Imaging Research Center at OHSU. Good morning.
Good morning.
So tell us about the Advanced Imaging Center and the research that it's doing.
The Advanced Imaging Research Center at OHSU is, I suppose it's been operating now for about 8 years. It was conceived about 10 years ago, and the university invested a significant amount of money, much of it based from Oregon Opportunity Funds, on building a cutting-edge imaging research center. We tend to focus on magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, and we have 4 MRI instruments, and 2 of them are really kind of cutting-edge instruments.
Tell us about it.
One of the ways that you characterize MRI instruments is by the strength of the magnetic field. As most listeners know, magnetic resonance imaging does involve the use of a large magnet, and you can characterize the strength of the magnetic field in the unit called Tesla. And so we have a 7 Tesla magnet that's a size for human subjects, and there are very few of those in the world. And we have a smaller instrument for animal model studies that is 12 Tesla, which is a very high magnetic field.
Well, it sounds like this center is really unique.
Yes, it's very unique. There are very few institutions in the country and, in fact, in the world who have ever built an imaging center of this quality from scratch. And the idea probably started about 10 years ago, and it really got realized 5 years ago.
And you focus on MRI. And what, I guess, is the future of MRI? I mean, how is it going to be improved?
We do indeed focus on MRI. There are a number of other important imaging modalities. One of them is CAT scanning, or CT. But MRI is a much more flexible and rich technique with many new developments going on and continuing to go on. There are probably literally hundreds of different ways to make MRI images, and that's one of the things that we do, is to develop new MRI approaches. In the last quarter century of the 20th century, medical imaging really came into its own, particularly with MRI and with CT. And exquisite high-resolution images of the human body, living body, were developed in the last 25 years of the 20th century, and to the point where now a significant fraction of medical diagnoses are made from imaging results as opposed to other methods. However, that period of time focused on anatomical imaging, where you were really seeing exquisite pictures of interior anatomy in a non-invasive way. And that's, of course, been extremely significant and very important. But as you can imagine, there are sometimes diseases that don't really manifest themselves with anatomical changes. And sometimes there are anatomical abnormalities that you see that don't really reflect a disease state. So the next stage of medical imaging that's really taking place in the 21st century is sometimes broadly called functional imaging, where you not only make very high-resolution images of the tissue anatomy and anatomical features, but you also measure certain physiological properties of the tissue. And you can present these in the form of a map, an image map, which is a false color image where the colors represent numbers that measure some physiological property. Like, for example, blood flow. You can measure the blood flow within every image pixel and make a map of that, or the relative blood volume fraction, the fraction of each pixel volume that's occupied by blood.
So bottom line, everything that you're doing is just really great for patients.
Well, that's the idea. That's what we're after, is to improve healthcare and the effectiveness of healthcare and the quality of life of people. And MRI, it's very rich and flexible and has a great deal of more development to go. And your listeners should know, and I'm sure they do, that it does not involve any ionizing radiation, as do CAT scans or PET scans. Not that that's terribly harmful in itself, but you do get a radiation exposure every time you have one of those scans. But in MRI, there is no ionizing radiation. In fact, what we use are radio waves that are very similar to the frequencies that are going out on this station right now in the FM range. So, in fact, we have to shield. You may know that you have to shield the scanning room from 101.1 FM waves because they would interfere with the MRI.
No, people need to listen to us all the time.
well, we can pipe you in an acoustic fashion, so we don't actually bring the radio waves into the room because they would interfere.
That's great. Dr. Charles Springer, Senior Scientist at the Advanced Imaging Research Center at OHSU. Thank you.
Thank you very much.